It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Every day there's something new. Every day you go, how much further, how much worse, how crazier can the Republican folk take us? Saw the story today, Donald Trump. Now understand, former president of the United States, publicly siding with a dictator of an adversary, while at the same time you got a congresswoman saying, yeah, we should have civil war. I'm in this weird kind of, you remember the America First people? You remember the flag waving folk? You remember them? You remember Country First? You remember that? Wow. What a day. Yeah, Donald Trump defended the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, and criticized our having a joint military operation with the South Koreans. He said Kim Jong-un of North Korea, who I got to know, remember, love letters, and got along with very well during my years as president, is not happy with the U.S. and South Korea doing big training and air exercises together. He feels threatened. Even I would constantly complain that the South Korea pays us very little to do these extremely expensive and provocative drills. It's really ridiculous. Now understand, the idea of holding these joint drills is because North Korea is an enemy. And that's kind of the point. So that you go, hey, how about not shooting nukes at us? How about not shooting nukes across the line there into the South? How about, not? And yet we've got a former president publicly defending publicly calling, I don't know what the thought process is here. But again, I guess I'm not supposed to. I mean, you've got a Republican Party right now torn. As I'm reading the reports, there's a Republican Party that's torn over supporting Putin and Russia or us. And I'm going, I never thought I would live to see the day that would be what's in front of us. Now, look, understand, we've always had the Southern folks who want to refight the Civil War. In fact, one of the first conversations I had when I moved to the area that I live in was with a guy who was a Civil War enactor, had the big blue X up on his pole and everything. And, this the war of northern aggression, and the South going to rise, all that stuff. And not surprising. Look, this is not new. Republicans have been flirting with this and dangling the carrot out in front of a lot of these folks for a very long time. I mean, I look at presidential hopeful Nikki Haley, who it's now been uncovered again that back in 2010 she defended states and their right to secede. She defended South Carolina for its Confederacy History Month and the Confederate flag flying out in front of the Capitol. And again, political expedience. And again, this is one of those moments where you go, does she believe this? To her core, is this a truly sincere, my favorite phrase from the sincerely held belief. Is this one of those? This is one of those sincerely held things? Or is this just BS that plays to the base? Now, I don't know about Nikki Haley. I'm not sure which side of this she's on. I know she said it. I know that the words came out of her mouth. I don't know if she really to her core believes it. Now, when I hear, people like Marjorie Three Names, when I hear Marjorie Taylor Greene say, we need a national divorce, which is the new code for civil war, it makes me go, she knows exactly what she's saying. And I believe she wants that. And it's gotten some interesting responses because I said, look, the reality is the way the federal government takes money in from all the states and then divvies it back out, redistributes it. Southern states, red states, they take more from the federal government than they put in. That's a fact. That's just the reality of how things work out. In fact, one poll showed 7 of the top 10 states being red states that take more from the federal government. Another one, because of how they view Maine, said 7. However you view Maine as a red state or a blue state or somewhere in between. So we'll say 7.5 of the top 10 are red states. And I simply said that, hey, I'm in favor of cutting that off, that you shouldn't get more than you put in, and that the excess money should be put into reserve. Maybe pay the debt off. I mean, that's something that red state leadership scream about. That's something that Republicans are losing their minds over. So how about we not give those states the excess and we pay our bills at home? How about that? Now, that's not going to fly because, these red states have been on the welfare wagon for quite some time. But they love pitching that, it's the welfare queen. They've been trying to bring the welfare queen back. And you remember the Reagan era welfare queen, the black woman with 17 kids driving around in the topless, pink Cadillac, drinking, Dom Perignon, eating steak every night off of your dime. Remember that? Again, never found her, along with the small family farmer who lost his farm because of the estate tax. But it paints a picture. So today when I got the response, I got a bunch of responses from people. When I said this, the response that came out that I found interesting is that, does this mean, we have this national divorce, the red states are going to be red states and the blue states are going to be the woke states. And they'll have all of this woke stuff, a bunch of lazy people who don't want to work. That's their framing. And the belief that and it came out and someone said the quiet part out loud. That, all those black people who take more than they give, they'll move to the blue states. And I'm going, I don't think that's going to happen. I think those people love the states they live in, and they're going to fight for their heritage and their roots just like anybody else. Because understand, there are no absolutely pure red states or absolutely blue states. There's a lot of people on all sides. And this kind of talk is about tearing us apart. This kind of talk is about ripping us to shreds. I found it interesting that a descendant of Robert E. Lee actually came out and said Marjorie Trainwreck Greene's comments were, what did he say, treasonous? Because he understands, the family lineage understands what she's saying. But it comes back to this idea, and look, it's the war between the states has been going on for a very long time, and Republicans have been winning it. Because someone reminded me that, all the farm subsidies go to these red states. All of the military bases that got shut down during the BRAC commissions, a lot of them were in blue states and saved because they needed the jobs. A lot of federal investment go to southern and red states because those folks understand. You got to bring home the bacon. You got to make sure that you fight for the workers in your area. And it's one of those things where someone had said to me, if you pulled all that money out, these areas would collapse. And I agree. You pull the federal money out of a lot of these red states, and their economies would collapse because food stamps, the reverberation effect is off the charts. When money goes to the local grocer, it then reverberates through the entire economy. But we can't talk about that because the quote unquote producers, they feel that they're entitled. If you want to talk about real entitlement reform, how about we talk about all the subsidies we give to corporations and we give to the very wealthy? How about we talk about that? But that's not what this is about. This is an ideological realignment. And what they want to live in their little ideological paradise. They want to be around people just like them. And to be honest, there's part of me, just from a pure, mental kind of a exercise, I would love to play that game out and see where it goes. Now, there have been moments of the past, and I point to, I guess it was maybe about 10 years ago or so, maybe a little bit longer. But I remember back in 2020, there was a story about Grafton, New Hampshire. And Grafton, New Hampshire was, it was one of the libertarian, wet dream list places to visit. And there was a push in New Hampshire to get all these libertarians and these free staters to go and to move to take over a state, to do exactly what Marjorie Three Names wants, to really make a state as crazy and as right wing and, live free or die, that kind of stuff is the state motto. That whole curmudgeon, nobody's going to tell me what to do. Screw the government, screw those authority types. I'm going to do what I want to do. And they did. They moved to Grafton and they got rid of all those onerous rules and regulations, and people could do whatever they want. They, go to Grafton, they said. Feed the bears, boxes of donuts, they said. Go to Grafton. Don't put lids on your garbage cans, they said. Because it's my right. It's my right to do whatever I want, and do whatever you want, they said. And what I find interesting is the story. This is the funny story here. They wiped away all these rules that were in place to help keep the giant bears from coming and taking over the town. So as you were the nice lady feeding the bears the donuts, and you missed the day, are you surprised that the bear is now in your living room eating you? When the garbage cans don't have a lid on it, are you surprised at 2:00 in the morning that they're digging into and causing a mess and a ruckus? Are you surprised at and that when you don't have simple rules and regulations in place that are meant to prevent certain behaviors that have predictable outcomes, that you have chaos? And this is, again, these people they have this, I'm going to live in a place, people just like me, as crazy as I am, without understanding that the sad reality is we don't all get to do whatever we want, whenever we want, however we want. We live in a society with others. And this is where the weird moment is, because, as we start down this road, how crazy now this is where I would love to see some of this exercise. I would like to see ideological places of all, white evangelical crazy people in one spot, as woke as you can get over here. You got Wokistan over there. And I would love to see how they interact and figure out how to exist. Now, the thing I got all the time is, the red states create all the food. No, they don't. There's a lot of mythology. There's a lot of belief that is so wrong. California is the largest food producer in the country. So, by a lot. And the amount of food produced by the red and blue states are about the same. This idea that the red states are the producers is ludicrous. But again, you got this belief because you've got a media structure that keeps feeding this poison. And it used to be in the past that this stuff was always out there. Because look, I've been talking about, making a provision to say you don't get more than you put in. If you're against ensuring that you have a social safety net, if you're against education for all, if you're against a bunch of stuff, we shouldn't be giving you a bunch of federal dollars. If all you're going to do is take the tax breaks that we're giving you to invest in things, like healthcare, education, people, and you give it to a handful of rich people, I'm sorry, we can use that money better somewhere else. Bad policy should not be rewarded. And I've been saying this for years. The difference was years ago, we didn't have as crazy of leadership. And my problem is with our leadership. People like Marjorie Three Names and Boebert, people like Gosar and Gomert, people like my congressman, Scott Pardon Me Perry. These are people who are they're not leaders. Most of them are attention seekers. Hey, look at me. But most of them are ideologues bought and paid for by the handful, the wealthy. And the working class always gets screwed. Because here's the thing. The people who are saying, those people are going to move to the woke states, implying that lazy people will go to blue states because blue states have a better social safety net. We take care of people a lot better. The implication is that, all the welfare lazy people will go and be in the blue states, and it's ludicrous. Because again, we know, food stamp programs overwhelmingly go to red states in big ways because they have a lot of poor people. And my problem with this whole divorce idea, I know who gets hurt. It's not Marjorie Greene. It's not Lauren Boebert. It's not any of the people calling for this stuff. It's poor people. It's working people. and this ideological nonsense, because the majority of the country doesn't want to see the United States being the 6 countries that everyone claims we are, because that leads to, well, war. Because I'm reminded, red states got more guns. Maybe. I think the blue state folk are catching up. But is that the country we want to live in? And is this the image we want to project? Everyone agrees. We got problems internationally. Russia, China. This kind of division at home, not helpful. Not at all. And to have national leaders calling for civil war, have a former president siding with a foreign dictator, we are definitely not on the right track. Want to hear your thoughts. Would a divorce be possible? I guess, is there a possible way to divorce us from each other? Maybe something Marjorie 3 Names knows a little bit about here recently. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back.
The old factory towns in America's heartland have been taking a beating. Thing is, though, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Unions are making a comeback. More organizing in the last couple of years than in a long time. And the Biden administration being more supportive of unions than any president since FDR. We're finally turning things around after 40 years of screwing over working people. But will we keep moving in the right direction? That's our choice as Americans.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, President of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
We are AFGE. We support our nation's military and our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders and provide services to our nation's seniors across the country and here in Washington, D.C. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
I talked about federal entitlements and how a lot of these southern states, they feel entitled to it. All the military bases we've left open in these red states, all of the federal investment, all of the money that's gone down there. And let's not forget all of the Social Security and Medicare. Remember, the entitlements. I found it interesting that former Speaker of the House, former Republican Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, angry at both Biden and Trump for putting the financial risk, the country at financial risk. Because they've sworn off changes to Medicare and Social Security. He said, Biden and Trump, I lump them in the same sentence. Biden and Trump are doing the opposite of leadership. They're trying to scare people, and they're playing political demagoguery with one of the most important issues facing our country this century. Yeah, stealing Social Security and Medicare from Granny evidently is the most important issue. Now, remember, the Republicans freaked out at the State of the Union. And because nobody's ever called for us to destroy Social Security and Medicare. Nobody ever has. I had people saying, name one person, and I would name 10. And they, name one more. And then I'll name one more, Mike Pence. Evidently, Pence is now out saying that we need to do some things. He said we're looking at a debt crisis in this country over the next 25 years that's driven by entitlements, and nobody in D.C. wants to talk about it. It should be on the table, and he's got this whole long term. We should talk about it. So kids, that means you. If you're under 40, that means you. They're going to screw you out of Social Security because hey, they've created this crisis, and Republicans never miss an opportunity to use a good crisis. And this is one of those things where you go, how does this happen? This happens because the wealthy want it. Now I go back to the George Carlin bit. Some 20 years ago, where he was saying, look, they want your Social Security money. They're going to get it. They're going to get it back. And they're going to give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. This has always been the play. The play has always been privatization. The play has always been to take money out of your paycheck, to put into a risky plan to say, let my hedge fund take over. You'll be fine until the next collapse. Privatization has never worked out the way they've sold it. But again, we keep, like the idiot who walks up to the guy with the 3 cards and thinks he's gonna, this time I'm gonna beat the dealer. You never beat the 3-card Monte dealer. Never. And this is it. They're selling us snake oil. And they're doing it because this is what the wealthy want. And I point to Ron DeSantis, who evidently just got a 7-figure donation from Jeffrey Yaz, the trader, investor, whatever, education destroyer, whatever you want to call him. Gave him $2.5 million to their state political committee in the name of friends of Ron DeSantis. Also, DeSantis got $1 million each from Jude and Christopher Reyes. Again, these are the wealthy of the wealthy in this country, choosing who they want to be in power positions so they can do what? Oh, yeah, whatever they want them to. And, this is one of those weird kind of moments where you go, they have to divide us. They have to pit us against each other. There's no way forward for them. I say all the time, we've outprocreated them. There are more of us. They may have all the money, and that's true, but there's more of us. So what do you have to do? You have to divide and conquer. Not rocket science. Don't need to be a genius. Don't need to have a crystal ball or a law degree from some Ivy League university. But the more we fight over nonsense, the more we're I look at some of the comments, and I know social media isn't reality. Social media is full of people who are the worst versions of themselves, most of the time just trying to make the other person look bad. And it's interesting. It's really interesting, the number of people who are now experts with, little blue check marks who have like 3 followers. There's something to that, and we'll get to that later. But it's one of those things where face-to-face talk stuff, you don't get into this kind of mud. And there's an opportunity. I think face-to-face, people want to find common ground. When you believe there's some anonymity and you're behind a curtain, that's when you're going to be a lot more willing to be disagreeable. And maybe we do need to come back into the square. Maybe we need to talk to people face to face. I tell my kids all the time, when we were kids, we worked things out. There were no parents, there were no cameras, there were no police, there were just a bunch of kids. And you learned your place, you learned what you could say, what you couldn't say. As I've said, when we stopped letting little 5-year-old boys beat each other up in the sandbox, things went off the deep end. Because that respect is gone. And I go back to this whole talk about we're going to secede. It's nonsense. It's idiot talk. It's never going to happen, and the majority of the country doesn't want it to happen. But you know what they can do with it? They can pit us against each other with it. So you go, oh, those lazy blue states or those lazy red states, and they can get us. Look, I don't want a national divorce. This country is only as great as the weakest Marjorie train wreck, Lauren gun fetish Barbie, any of them. They are literally tearing us down. Our job is to ignore the noise and move forward. That's what we need to be working on. That's what we need to be focusing on. Rebuilding, reviving, reuniting, reunionizing, sharing the wealth, building for the future. That's what we need to be doing. But I guess it is fun to have this exercise and this mental game around what if we did get a divorce? Still lunacy. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
I'm JD Schulten with Courier News, and I'm here to tell you you're probably getting screwed. In January, we saw tech layoffs from PayPal, IBM, Intel, Spotify, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Salesforce, and more. At the same time, America corporations authorized a record $132 billion in stock buybacks, more than tripling what we saw a year ago. This has become a recent theme: layoffs and stock buybacks. Facebook's parent company, Meta, laid off 13% of its staff. more than 11,000 employees late last fall. Earlier this month, they announced $40 billion in stock buyback. Dell laid off 6,650 workers, or 5% of its workforce last week. But over the last 2 years, Dell authorized $5 billion in stock buybacks. According to best-selling author and podcaster Adam Grant, mass layoffs are counterproductive, and that hundreds of studies show that firms that downsize end up being less profitable than peers that find other ways to lower costs, like executive pay cuts. Currently, for corporate executives, the majority of their compensation comes from stock options and stock awards. When they use open market repurchases, it manipulates their company's stock prices to their own benefit, often making a ton of money for investment bankers, hedge fund managers, and corporate executives at the cost of workers, shareholders, and more. The growing use of stock buybacks since the mid-1980s has warped the economy, worsened inequality, distorting corporate decision-making, and diverting resources from investment in employees and hard assets. And think about this. Norfolk Southern, the company whose train derailed in Ohio and unleashed chemicals, made a record $12 billion in revenue last year. Instead of investing in better safety measures, what did the company do? It authorized $10 billion in stock buyback. Overall, the underlying problem with corporate buybacks and their obsession with stock price performance is that it makes U.S. households more vulnerable to a boom and bust economy. In the State of the Union, President Biden's call for quadrupling the tax on corporate stock buybacks is good, but banning buybacks done as an open market repurchases is better, just like it was before 1982.
Before we close the program, we want to take a moment to thank our viewers and to share a little bit about why we do what we do. At the Rick Smith Show, we believe that media today is almost entirely controlled by corporate greed. So we have now 24-hour news channels. But instead of 24 hours of news, what we get is 1 hour repeated 24 times, and with tons of commercials creating obscene amounts of profits. Information once presented as a public service has now become a private commodity. So when lies make money, lies are what we get. We get a corporate-controlled rage machine feeding us anger and hate, trying to convince us that our problems are right-left or red-blue, when they are and always have been up-down, the wealthiest 1% versus the rest of us. Our goal is to be an alternative to that machine, not as a news show with a fancy journalist out front, but as a talk show run by a union truck driver and a team of working-class heroes just like you. Everything we do, both what we get right and what we get wrong, is dedicated to advancing the interests of America's working families. No corporate ad buys, no think tanks, no focus groups, no talking points. We are media by working people, for working people. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.